Hello everyone, how are you? Welcome to Beyond the Cloud. In this video, we will show you how to authenticate AWS API Gateway requests using JWT token from Auth0. Once the token is successfully updated, API Gateway will forward the request to Lambda function, which interacts with DynamoDB table. By the end of this tutorial, you will understand how to secure your serverless APIs with Auth0 and AWS services. If you are new to this channel, kindly like, share, subscribe, and comment your thoughts. Let me know what you liked and what you didn't. I will make some recommended video from you guys if you have any. So sit tight and enjoy.
So HTTP API. HTTP API is a new solution in AWS for building low-cost APIs, which also support JWT, JSON-based web token, and this JWT authorization. And they integrate with external identity providers such as Auth0 for easy and industry standard authorization practices. So this particular tutorial focuses on building an HTTP API using Amazon API Gateway and integrate with Auth0 to restrict write access to only to authorized user. So on the next slide, uh, this is kind of an introduction of what is an HTTPS API and what is an authorization. So let's start with an obvious statement like building a modern API isn't exactly a straightforward process. The list of requirements seems to grow. It should be performant, easily scalable, highly available, secure, and that's before you get to writing your actual business logic. So to give you an overview or like what is an HTTPS API? So an HTTPS API is a hypertext transfer protocol secure API, which uses a HTTPS protocol, the secure version of HTTP, as a communication protocol for exchanging data between a client and a server. So, if a client tries to access a data from a server and it goes through a secure HTTP connection or secure HTTP protocol communication, then it is an HTTPS API. Now, what is an authorizer? So an authorizer, on the other hand, defined in API Gateway are service that allow restrict the API access from client to server uh, to only an authorized user and permissions and IP addresses and so on. So we will in this tutorial focus on only to the authorized user who have a correct token assigned to them. So this is how this is what we will follow or we will give you an introduction in this video. So now imagine if you are building an API, you will likely to need restrict endpoint access to at least some of your endpoints eventually. So identity as a service solution like Auth0 can easily implement or easily handle the authentication and authorization for a variety of applications. But how can they be integrated in a service in like API Gateway? So the answer comes in the form of a new HTTP API feature supporting an industry standard authorization, that is the JWT authorizer. So on the next slide, we will focus on what is a JWT authorizer. So if you see the definition, the JWT authorizer are a new type of authorization which uses a JSON web token to provide access control to your API endpoints. So this API or JWT JWT authorizer is built on an industry standard OpenID Connect spec and an OAuth 2.0 protocol. So this is very new. And also, once it is configured, it requests your API to require access to a token that the authorization or that the authorizer will validate in backend. And the access token must adhere to the format of JWT. Then the authorizer validates the number of standards, reserved claims following the JWT spec, and then it also have a particular algorithm to validate your token. And if everything works well, then only your request will be served. So the JWT authorizers support any identity provider, a service providing user identity storage and authentication that can access tokens that follow OIDC and OAuth 2.0 standards, such as Auth0. Now, on the next slide, I will elaborate how a JWT authorization process actually works. So if you look into the picture, you will be able to see, if you follow the digits, you will be able to see the series of steps that happening whenever a get or post request happen to a server. So if you follow the digits, like for an example, um, when an HTTP request is made to an API, like here, when an HTTP request first made to an API, which includes also a JWT formatted access token provided by the token issuer, the example Auth0. Then the request is received by API Gateway here, and then it is forwarded to the passes the token. The token is forwarded to the JWT authorizer for validation. Then the JWT authorizer sends a request to the JSON web key set, that is the JWKS endpoint, to retrieve the authorization server public key used to verify the JWT. So they have a particular algorithm which you will mention, and they will validate upon with that particular algorithm if your token is valid, or whatever you are passing the token, if it is valid, and then it will compare to the public key of the particular token. Then the authorization server returns the public key to the JWT authorizer, and then JWT authorizer then validates the access token, confirming with the API gateway that the request can continue. Then we are coming back to our API gateway, and then our API gateway knows, yes, this is the valid user and the request can go through. Then the API gateway runs the Lambda and implementing the business logic whether to get the request or post any request. And then the Lambda calls the DynamoDB table to write the request or get the request or whatever it is. And then the data returned from DynamoDB table to Lambda, and eventually from Lambda to API gateway. And from API gateway returns an HTTP response to the requesting application. So this is how the JWT authorization process works. The way that I have simplified the version, it is not that much simple. I mean, the background process of the authorization is pretty complex, but we don't have to look into that. We will create authorization mechanism for sure, OAuth0 for sure, but we don't have to validate the authorization token, because authorization server or JWT authorization server OAuth0 will automatically do that for us in background. So we just have to pass the bearer token. How do we do that? How do we set up the Auth0? I will everything come later or in this tutorial. So, in a nutshell, what is our objective? So, our first objective would be create a DynamoDB table and a Lambda function. So, to serve the request from API gateway. Then, our objective two is to create a new OAuth API as an identity provider. We will also create an API gateway to serve the HTTP traffic. And at the last, we configure the authorizer and test our application, that if the authorizer, if the authenticated user requests from in an API gateway an HTTP request, and the user has been served the response or not. So this is what we will do. And then on, so now I think you have understood the idea behind this and what we will do in this tutorial. Now it's time to go some hands-on practical. So let's go, and I hope you will enjoy this video. So to do that, you must have a AWS account configured, and also an Auth0 profile. You have or authentic Auth0 login server you need to configure. How do you do that, or how can you sign up for an Auth0 login? I will show you in my tutorial. So I hope you will enjoy this video. So sit tight. Okay, so I am inside my AWS console where I will be working along with this tutorial. So And also I have chosen this North Virginia region. You can choose whatever region you want to follow through this video. Make sure you have access to spin up resources on that region. Okay, so first of all, what we will do, we will create a DynamoDB table and a Lambda function for our backend. So we can go either to DynamoDB table, we search for this DynamoDB, and this is our main table, which will hold the records which our Lambda will communicate. So upon the DynamoDB table, the DynamoDB screen is appeared. Now you can create a table here, and we can give the table name as wishlist. You can give whatever name you want, but make sure whatever name you are giving here in the table, that should match to your Lambda code, which I will come just a bit later. And the partition key, please mention it as ID. Partition key is the primary key as well. So this has to be unique. Um, so the partition key I mentioned as ID, you also should mention ID. And then short key is kind of optional. I will leave it out and I will not change anything else, and I will just create the table. So while the table is being created, I think it will take a couple of seconds just to be the table active. I hope, let's see, the table is active now. So my table is ready. Now let's go to the Lambda console and create the Lambda function. And I will create a function, and then I will just give it a name called wishlist service, and then I will choose the runtime as Python 3. So I have the code in Python. You can choose whatever language you want. Then you have to convert the code that I will be giving to into that particular form. But if you want to follow through this video, maybe you can choose Python and then just create the function. So while this function is being created, um, let's go to the DynamoDB table once and then go to the table inside and explore the table items, and which currently there is no item inserted, or there is no item. So what I will do, I will create an item where ID is the primary key, and maybe I will add uh, a name with a random number and digit, alphanumeric digit, and I will just create the item. So this is just a sample item that we have created, which we will retrieve in the first retrieval, in the first call from our API gateway. So this item will be retrieved anyway. Okay, so I hope my function is ready now. Yeah, the function is ready, and you can see the function code is given something here. So what I will do, I have a sample code which we will walk through. So I will paste it here. So I am going to select and paste my Lambda code here. Just to give you an overview, what is this? We are importing couple of JSON and Boto3 library, and then the DynamoDB table. We are initializing a resource, Boto3 resource of DynamoDB table, and the table name is the one that we have given, wishlist. And then the table, we are creating an object of the DynamoDB table with the table name that we have mentioned. Then this is my main Lambda handler. Whenever there is any event happening, so it will print the event, and then it will extract the HTTP method out of the event. Various events are from various format. So maybe we have to adapt this line by which the requests are coming in. But as of now, this is fine. If this is not okay, then we will get a key error or something. So we will look into that later. But yeah, this is my Lambda function. Then we are extracting the HTTP method, and if it is a GET request, then it is scanning the DynamoDB table and just returning a 200 message. And if it is not finding anything, then it will return a 500 resource not found. And if the HTTP method is post, that means we try to write something in the DynamoDB table. Then it will insert the item. It will create an item, and then based on the item, it will insert the item in the DynamoDB table, and it will return a 201 that the insertion is complete. And if there is any problem, it will return a 500 status code. And if there is an overall problem or something, then it will return a 400 code. This is a simple code in Python that I have written, and this is my Lambda function, and I will deploy the Lambda function now. and my deployment is done. What we will do now, we go to the configuration of the Lambda function, and we see that the timeout is kind of 3 seconds. To be fail safe, I will just increase the timeout to 30 seconds or something. So this will give us a edge over the timeout if there is anything, but it is not. And there is another option for the existing role. So if you see the existing role of the DynamoDB of the Lambda function, it's called wishlist service role. We can save this and we can see the role from the permission section here as well. And you see wishlist service role. We first go to the role, and then if we open the role, we see that there are a couple of permissions. Only basic execution permission is given, which is kind of CloudWatch log putting and something, but the DynamoDB table function is not given. So what we can do here, we can add a policy to the function and give the DynamoDB specific policy. But to be in safer side, I will give the administrative access to the Lambda function and I will add the permission. But in production, do not give the administrative access. Whatever particular permission or the policy it needs, please give that. But just to be in the demo purpose, you can give administrative access, but not in production. Please remember, in production, do not give administrative permission to the Lambda function. Now if I just refresh this page of the Lambda function, we see that all permissions are given. Okay, so our Lambda function is ready, and the Lambda function is ready to insert data in our DynamoDB table. This is fine, but we will not do it directly from here, right? So we will have an API gateway which will serve the traffic to the Lambda function, and then the Lambda function will insert the data to the DynamoDB table. So what we have to do, we have to create an API gateway. So we go to the API gateway now, and we open the API gateway console. And when we open the API gateway console, there is the first, so this will come at first. Then we have to choose which type of API gateway we want to create. So I will choose the HTTP API, and I will choose the build for HTTP API. And right now I will not choose any kind of integration here. We will do the integration later. So this API gateway needs a name. So I will give this same name like the Lambda function here, and I will just add an API. So wishlist service and API, and then I will select next. And then right now I will not configure any route to it. I will choose next, and then the stage name is default, and auto deploy is also kind of is okay for me. And then I will choose next, and everything else I will leave as it is, and I will create the API gateway. So my API gateway is being created and success. So you see successfully created API gateway, and the API gateway is here. So this is my API gateway and this is my endpoint. You can invoke the API gateway, but it will have a not found error because right now there is no integration for my API gateway anywhere, and it does not know where to go because we have not configured any route to this API gateway. So my API gateway is here up. Now let's create a so let's first do the integration. So yeah, we have, so yeah, let's first create the route. So we are creating a route, suppose for the root URL. So for any root URL, any thing, the one that we have hit. So if we hit this URL, this is the root URL, and if we hit this one right now, not found, nothing found. So we will create a route for this one. First, let's create a route, and then we will create it. And this is my root URL route. And right now there is no integration, right? So let's attach an integration to it. And I will create and attach an integration, and the integration type should be Lambda. And whenever I will select the Lambda, it will ask me to choose a Lambda function from my region. So this is my wishlist service Lambda function I will choose, and I will create it. So my integration is done. So whenever the integration will be done, we will be able to see it in the route section. In the route itself, if you choose the any now, you will see the integration is here. Another part is you can see here that if you go to the Lambda function and if you just refresh the page of the Lambda console, you will be able to see one triggering happening from the API gateway to Lambda here. One trigger that will come up here. Here is the API gateway trigger, and the API gateway trigger, from the API gateway trigger, you see, if we now trigger this URL, the Lambda will be called. And another very interesting thing will happen is that if you go to the permission section and on the resource based policy, now there will be one new permission added, uh, and the permission is the Lambda invoke function can be invoked by the API gateway.amazonaws.com. This is automatically added. If this was not there, then we do not have permission to invoke this Lambda from the API gateway, but this is automatically added. So now we have permission to trigger the Lambda function from the API gateway. And this is the API gateway URL. Now, if I go back to the URL and let's just refresh this one, and we see that a message internal server error coming up. Why? Because in the Lambda function itself, let's go to the monitoring and let's go to the CloudWatch. Let's see what is happening there. Let's see. So I hope my Lambda function is invoked so that some CloudWatch logs is being generated. Let's see what logs has been generated. So we see one log has been generated here. This is my Lambda log, and if I open this one, we see that there is a warning and there is a key error. As I said, so there is a key error called HTTP method happening. So that means the HTTP method cannot be retrieved by this. So now if we see the event, we are trying to retrieve the request context, then HTTP, then method, right? But in my code, I remember I have given request context HTTP method, but this HTTP and method are different. That's why we got one key error, and it is complaining that there is no thing called HTTP method under request context. So that's why the key error happened. So what we can do to resolve this error, we go to the wishlist function, we go inside the code, and we change this part only here, and then we give it as small m, then we give it this one. All right, that's it. Now we are retrieving from request context the HTTP, and under HTTP that is the method. And if you see the logs, so we have under request context we have HTTP, and under that we have method. Now I hope my code will work just fine. My Lambda code will work fine. So my deployment is done for the Lambda function, and I hope the HTTP method will be retrieved correctly. Now let's go back to the browser and refresh this one. And now we see that from the DynamoDB table, my ID BTC6432 is retrieved. But did you notice one thing? This is not secure, right? So anyone can invoke this URL and get the data. So the idea behind this tutorial is to have a authorization before user can even get the request or can even insert the request. So this is the idea. So what we can do, we can go to the API gateway first of all and delete the root route. We do not need the root route. So I will delete this one. And then we create a route called wishlist service, and we get a get method. So for my get method, if I give this slash wishlist service and create this one, okay. So my get method is attached now to the wishlist service URL. Now if we hit the root URL, we will be able to see that not found because there is no root URL configured right now. So all we have to do, we have to give this wishlist service as well. But before that, my get method, we need to attach the integration. So we will attach the integration of again the wishlist service, the integration that we have created. It's a Lambda integration which goes to the wishlist service Lambda function, and I will attach this integration. So as soon as I attach this integration, then what we have to do, then we go to here in our terminal, and we will give this terminal, and we will hit the URL with our terminal now, because from now onwards I will hit our API gateway with this terminal instead of doing it in a web browser, because we will do in future a post request as well, which is very easier to do it with a terminal. So what I will do, I will go to this API gateway, copy this link, and then I will paste it, and then I will give this paste service, and I will hit enter. So as soon as I hit enter, I see the ID is returned. So I see my get request is going to the DynamoDB table, going to the Lambda function, collecting the data to the from the DynamoDB function without any authentication, because we have not configured any kind of authentication right now. And okay, and again we go to the routes and we create another route for post request. This is under also wish list service, the same URL I want to invoke, and I will create the route. And for post request, I will also attach the same integration called my Lambda integration, and I will attach it. So my get and post request both are Lambda integrated, and I will also do one post request to my wish list service. So let's see how we can do the post request. Okay, so here is my post request. Here is my post request. How we will do that? So we will do curl, then the header is the application JSON, and then we will do the request type as post, and then we will have the data where we have the name. You can give whatever data you want to insert the DynamoDB table. It has a name function, description function, and URL. The ID will be automatically generated as it is the primary key. It will be automatically generated. So you can give whatever description you want. The URL is something you can also give whatever URL you want. And then what it will hit, where it will post, this one. So this is our API gateway URL and slash wishlist service. Remember, we have given the post request under the wishlist service. So we have to give this wishlist service here and after the API gateway, URL. So this will have our post request configured, or this will give us the ID back if it is inserted into our DynamoDB table. So yeah, we can see our post request Lambda integration is also configured. Now we go back to route and go back to our nodes here. I will just copy this one now, it with right click, and then I will come back to here in the terminal and I will paste it. So now my post request is configured, and I will hit enter. So as soon as I hit enter, if you remember from our code that if there is any write request goes to the Lambda, it will return a 201 and it returned the ID as well. So right now the post request also went from our API gateway to Lambda to DynamoDB table, and DynamoDB table returned the ID. So if you go to the DynamoDB table and then refresh, you see here two data inserted. One is from our API gateway, this request came in, and this is the test description, and this is the URL, and the first one just we have created, apart from ID there is nothing. Okay, so we see that our API gateway is working, but is this the correct way of working with API gateway? Because anyone anywhere can grab the URL now, can grab this particular URL and can hit with any data, and it will go to our DynamoDB table. So this is not what we want, right? So at least the post requests should be authorized. So what we can do here, we can implement an authentication mechanism. So if you go to the API gateway and the authorization, you see under manage authorization, we can create an authorization under JWT. But before creating an authorization under JWT, you have to have a JWT token or API configured. Where do you configure? It is in Auth0 website. So if you go to this website, I will uh, give you the link of this website in my description box. If you go to this website, there is a free way. This is a free website where you can log in to with your email ID or password, or you can log in with your social media credentials. But what you can do, you can create a free API with that. So as soon as you log into this website, you will be able to see the dashboard first, and from the getting started this dashboard first, and from there, if on the left hand side under applications you can see the API. Under here you can create your API for authentication. So what you can do here, you can create an API name, you can give name as AWS JWT Auth. That's it. And you have to give a particular identifier for this. So I will type in the identifier now. So the identifier is HTTPS. I am choosing the identifier as Auth0. So this is Auth0 and then JWT and then Authorizer. So HTTPS Auth0 hyphen JWT hyphen authorizer. So this is my identifier. I will not change any kind of JSON Web Token profile, and I will not change any algorithm. So I will choose the RS256 algorithm and I will create the API. So you also should create the API along with the identifier. So this is the identifier. I will paste everything in the description box as well as the GitLab repository where it holds this identifier and everything. You can check the description box. Now, as soon as you create the API, there will be a quick start guide on how to use the API. So there are three language. One is C#, Node.js, and PHP, which actually gives you an overview how to authenticate your application using this authorizer. So this authority and audience is very important. This one we need in our API gateway to configure our authentication. So this is why it gives here. And then it also gives you, if you go into the test, under test you will also get the bearer token by which the authority and authorizer will authenticate your application. So these two are very important. So I will open this. I will still be in this page just to have this copied. Instead, apart from that, whenever you create an API, there is another applications also created for you. This application serves the purpose of having your own test application. If you want to have an authenticated application with a client ID, client secret, and on the domain. So this is your application where you can authenticate. This client secret will be shown to you here. You can copy it. You here the credentials files and everything. So how can you authenticate your application from in this Auth0? This is also given. So this is a kind of machine to machine communication. For machine to machine communication, this is very needed. This is not a tutorial of Auth0, but yeah, if you want to use this application, you can definitely use it. But I will come back to the API details here, the one that we have created, and then under authority and audience, I can see that the two URLs are given, right? So what we can do, we can go back to our API gateway here under API gateway. In the authorizer, we have to create the authorizer. So if you go to the authorizer, first of all, it will show you what kind of routes we have. We have get and post. Both of them doesn't have any kind of authorizer. But if we select manage authorizer and create one, we will be able to see the JWT authorizer is popping up here. Then we have to give it a name. I am giving it as a JWT auth. This is fine. And then identity source is fine. But the main thing is issuer URL that you have to mention. The one that I am mentioning, this is the authority. This is the same thing. This is the issuer URL that you have to mention along with the slash. Remember, the slash is very important, the end slash, otherwise it will not work. And I will also choose one audience, and the audience is this one, authorizer, and here, and I will, so that's it. And then I will create the authorizer. So this is my JWT authorizer is created. So I will create this authorizer, and now the JWT authorizer is created. Now I have created the authorizer. Now I have to attach this authorizer somehow, right? So I am in the post request under authorization. I will select the post method, and I will select the authorizer as JWT authorizer, and then I will attach the authorizer. Now, my post requests are authenticated. That means if you are doing a post request, you have to have a bearer token, you have to have a authenticated token alongside with you, or you have to be a authenticated user. So I will choose this as an authenticated token. I will use the token. to have the post request. But for testing, let's go back to post request. Now I see authorization is attached. Now we will do a similar thing, the one that we have given previously. This post request, we will give it again. We will hit this service again, and let's see in this case uh, what is returned. So now we see a message returned unauthorized because our post requests are now authenticated, needs to be authenticated. So we have configured authentication in our post request. So any kind of unauthorized request will not be served. So API Gateway will drop the request because it will say, hey, requester, you don't have an authentication configured. So either you do not have a bearer token or you are not an authorized user. So you cannot do the post request. But can you do the get request? Let's see. So you have curl -I and we have this URL. I will copy this and I will paste it here. And if I hit enter, I still see my data. So these are the data. This is the ID and description and everything. And this is the description. This is the second item. So I can see my get requests are successfully coming up, but my post requests are not going up because post requests are getting unauthorized error because we have configured authentication. So how to give the authentication to our post request? So we have to build the post request. So if you go back here under API details, as I told, under test, there is a bearer token, which there is an access token that you can check. So you copy this one and paste it in our notepad here. So I have copied the bearer token and let me form the post request. So now I have formed the post request with a bearer token. Now you see, if you compare the previous command with this one, you will be able to see there is another header called authorization and the bearer and the token type is bearer, and I have pasted the token, the one that I have copied from the Auth0 website. And apart from that, everything else is same. Now I am doing a post request and the name, maybe we can change this to google.com, and test description, URL and everything is same, but the URL is different and I'm giving an authorization token. Now, this request should go through because I am giving an authorization token from Auth0 where the authority and the issuer and the audience is something similar. So this authentication token, now API Gateway will take this authentication token, go back to our Auth0 website. It will give our authentication server the token, and it says that, hey, I got this token and I have my requester, my authorization process tell me to go here and give you the token, and is this the same one or is this matching? So then the Auth0 website will run some backend process, and then it will validate the token with the issuer, with the audience, with the algorithm that we have provided, and it will see if the token that we have provided is matching to this one or not. So now if I just copy this one, and then the Auth0 will return to the API gateway, yes, this token is valid. We are the authorizer and we are the audience of this token, and this algorithm is valid. And then the token is valid, and you can serve the request. Then the API gateway will serve the request from our backend Lambda. So now if I just copy this one and paste it here with the token itself, and if I hit enter, and I think I have done, yes, the URL is wrong. So let me clear the screen and let me have this URL correct. So this is my wishlist service URL. So I will copy this one, and this particular URL was wrong. So I will paste it here, and then I will copy again, and then I will paste it. This time the URL is correct, and then I will hit enter. And you see the ID is returned. That means my post request is now served with a correct bearer token. Now if I if I give a, okay, let me just clear the screen. Sorry, I have to copy the request only. So I will give this one. and I will do -I and then the service. Now we see that 3 ID came up. So this one we have entered very recently with our authentication mechanism. So that means our authentication and authorization is working. And if we go back to our DynamoDB table, and if we just refresh the screen, we see another entry is created with authentication. So we have seen that how can we authenticate an API gateway with a bearer token with Auth0 with JWT Authorizer. So this is very important in production environment, that your API gateway should serve the request. Read requests are fine. Even I consider the read request should also be authenticated. So you can also attach the authentication, the one that we have given here. You can also attach this authentication to our GET request. Right now, GET request does not have any authentication. Maybe this is a task to you for a homework. You attach this authentication to your GET request and try to grab the data with the bearer token. So what we have done, the GET requests are still open. User can go and get the data or read the data, but they cannot insert the data if they are not authorized. So if they are authorized, they can insert the data. So this is what I wanted to show you with a JWT token, which is a very nice way of configuring your authentication. So this is it. This is what I wanted to show you. I hope you really liked the video. Please let me know in the comment section how your testing went, and what do you experience, and is there any difficulties having those. Please remember this website of Auth0. I will post the link of this website. This login and the sign up is totally free. You can create your API with free, the way that I have created. Let me know in the comment section how do you like the video. I will be back with another exciting video. So till then, take care and goodbye.